What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Stories with Mr. Ahamad. Thank you so much for joining me here in my home. It's always a pleasure to have you here listening to me talk about books. Now, y'all know that I love Nic Stone. I love her work. I love how she writes. I love her storytelling techniques. I love where she draws inspiration from and what she sets out to do with it. She's just a great match for me. And there is something to be said about having a great match when it comes to an author and their books. It's just like, once you find what you enjoy, why not read all of it? And that got me thinking, like, this is thing that Ty Allen Jackson put out. He's a local author where I'm from. And he did this TED Talk about how authors are rock stars and should be treated as such.
I want you to imagine you and your child walking down the street, and coming towards you is LeBron James. Would you recognize LeBron James? Of course you would, and so would your child. And your child might even be able to give you a little bit of trivia, like which basketball teams he's played for, or how many championships he's won. Because LeBron James is one of the more recognizable athletes in the world. If in that same street, Beyonce Knowles started walking towards you, would you recognize Beyonce Knowles? Of course you would. And so would your child, and they would be able to tell you all about her from her favorite songs and that she's married to one of the greatest hip-hop artists of all time. And if Jeffrey Kenny started walking towards you, would you recognize him? Would you know who he was? Would your child recognize him and know who he was? Ironically, Jeffrey Kenny is just as viable and just as important in his genre as the aforementioned celebrities and athletes. For Jeffrey Kenny is the author of the Diary of a Wimpy Kid series. We all had that little aha moment. But why isn't he as recognizable as the aforementioned celebrities and athletes? What is it about the world of authorship in which they are not promoted in the same vein? And this is remarkably important because this is how we learn. We learn by who we idolize. We all grew up wanting to idolize a famous celebrity, a famous actor, actress, an artist, an architect, or someone that we found personally or media-drivenly relevant. But in the world of authorship, there's this sense of anonymity that just doesn't quite work in the world of pop culture. And that is a tremendous issue. There are no real celebrities in the world of literature.
With this in mind, I just want to take a moment to redirect you to Nic Stone's page if you've never been there, because she's putting some great work out. And that work that she does outside of her books, like, you know, her holding race-sensitive professional developments for teachers on her Instagram Live, and her going into these juvenile detention facilities so that she can talk to young men, and her just, you know, touring to talk to high school students and to college students. All of that stuff is worth knowing because it helps to develop your understanding for what's in the book and make it that much more important. So, you know, without further ado, today we are talking about Dear Justice, which is Nic Stone's latest book. And this book, man, is just, it was so good because, like, you know, it taught me so many things, but never at any point was it preachy. This is a spinoff to one of my favorite books, Dear Martin. Not just my favorite book to read, but my favorite book to teach. So when I heard that Dear Justice was coming out, I found out about it like last spring. I pre-ordered it ASAP, and I knew that it was just gonna hit me in a way that no other book has, because Nic Stone just has a way of doing that. Where Dear Martin follows Justyce and SJ and Jared, and they're all in Doc's class and working towards a debate championship and getting into college, right? There's this whole thing about, you know, black kids needing to code switch when they're in certain spaces and microaggressions. Nah, this book isn't about that. This book is about Justice's old acquaintance Quan, who was gang affiliated and who didn't have things going well for him. Now, I have read, not just in the intro of this book, but also on Nic Stone's Instagram page, that she was inspired by some of the kids that she met while she was out doing workshops and touring for Dear Martin. And they specifically said something along the lines of, like, Dear Martin was so cool, but Justyce had his stuff together. He had hope. He had resources. It would be great to see a book that's about us, that's really about us, the kids who don't have any of that. And so much of this book is about how a child can make every right decision. A child can do everything in their power to put themselves on the right track. But when it comes down to it, chance, circumstance, there are things that are going to be clearly and so far out of their control because they are children. And this is something that we have to consider when we are working with our youth who are sorting through things, who may be troubled, who may lack parental direction or an adult role model. There's so much to consider. And at the end of the day, what it really comes down to is just that we all just have to have a better, more giving heart if we are going to serve children and if we're going to serve our community. There's no point in being a teacher or working with kids if you don't like kids or if you don't have it in you to give. Like, you're doing a disservice to them, and that's miserable. So this book will provide you with all that information. So personally for me, I'm not gonna lie, like being from Brooklyn, New York, like I was blessed enough to have both of my parents in my life. We had a home. My family was pretty set, and but I had a lot of friends. Well, not my friends, but I knew a lot of people at school. I knew a lot of people around the way who joined gangs and who did that, and I just never understood, like, why would you want that? But this book really goes over it. It really talks about it, and you can tell that Nic Stone not only did the research, but she spent time with the people in those situations to really understand, and this really helped to change my thinking. So, there are kids out there who need us to understand that things are tough. Things are tough, and we should have the heart to help them. So Dear Justyce isn't that long. It's longer than Dear Martin, but it reads really fast. And that's because in typical Nic Stone fashion, she writes in a variety of ways. Is that you get the narrative, and then this time around, sticking to what she did in Dear Martin, she gives you like a letter or like a journal entry. And it helps to keep the pace going. Speaking of help, what happens in this book is that, it follows Laquan. He ends up in the juvenile detention system after making bad decision after bad decision because he just didn't have the support that he needed. And I don't want to spoil anything, but there was some real heartbreaking stuff in here. It's like, it just hits you. Like, the book starts and then it's like hit after hit after hit after hit, and it doesn't slow down. And that is indicative of the experience of youth that are going through these situations. But anyway, there's this one point in the book. I don't want to give too much away because y'all know how I do. No spoilers here. I just want y'all to go buy it and read it and put it in front of people, right? So even if you're a student, if you're a young person and you're looking for something to read, get this, read it, and then give it to someone else. It's that good. So this is part where Quan is in a session. He's talking to someone, and they were like, if you could give anyone to someone in a situation like you, because you can see the cover, things don't go quite well for Quan. It says, if you can give something to someone in a situation like you, what would it be? And the thing that he said was belief, and that it's unconditional, and that it's supportive and love. And that really resonated with me because we try so hard to give people things that we think they want, when time and love and patience, those things that don't cost anything, those things that just require us to work on ourselves so that we can give it to someone else, that's what's most important to give. So this book goes over that, and it's such a beautiful book. there's a lot that happens in this book, and it's reflective in the writing. Like the way that it's written also complements what Quan is going through. And the reason why I said black and brown people in the criminal justice system is because while this book is not about race, race happens to be a component of it. So y'all know what I like to do. I like to tell you how to teach it if you're going to teach it. So if you're going to teach this, which you should because it's brilliant, is that there's this part in the book when Quan, he goes from being at home and taking care of things, and then bad decisions pile up because circumstance, right? And when he first gets in, he says something about how he realizes that the black and brown faces that come through seem to be there for life, but the white faces that come through are in and out. And Nic Stone does this thing that I did not realize until I read more of her books, but she takes these real news stories and she plants them into her work so that you can have context in terms of what it is that she's getting at, so that beyond a shadow of a doubt that it's not fictional. This stuff is real. The things that she's trying to address are really out there, and that's why she writes. When Quan goes into juvie and he's seeing everyone come in and out, he said, lots of black and brown kids, they in here with me. It seems like we here forever. The white kids, though, they come in and they go. And he specifically talks about this one kid, white boy Sean. Now, what shocked me about this is that when it comes up that there was this kid who was like 16 or something like that, and he stabbed his dad in his sleep, went to juvie, but they made amends somehow and they gave him community service and he was right back out instantly. I was like, yo, that can't be real. I recognized it because I remember reading it in the news because it is real. Search it up on Frontline. Man, if you read this book, if you read Dear Justice, or if you teach it, then you gotta cover that. It's such a real situation, and it just speaks to how marginalized some people are by design. How is it that someone for a non-violent offense can, end up on a track where they will remain in prison, but someone who attempts murder on their parent is free and totally fine? One is not like the other. What's the difference? It's race, right? I've seen a lot of people right now talking about critical race theory and how it's evil and how it just promotes division. Look, we ain't trying to divide people, y'all. Right? There's a lot of studies out there. There's a lot of books that you can read right now. We don't want division. We do want people to understand so that we can work towards equity. That's all anyone really wants. So that's all anyone really wants. Like, stop being so much in your feelings. Like, take the criticism, humble yourself. Like, let us all work together. Read a good book, put it in front of your kids. Like, this is something that we gotta talk about. Secondly, y'all know I love Queen Ava DuVernay's When They See Us, and anytime I can incorporate that in class, it's gonna happen. So when I think about this book, I specifically think about episode 3, where all the guys are getting out of jail and they're going back into the world and they're trying to reintegrate. And it's so difficult. Like, they're having a hard time getting a job, they're having a hard time building relationships, and Quan experiences that. As he's working with Doc on his studies to, get his high school diploma, what he points out, at one point he falters and he's like, why am I even doing this? I'm not gonna be able to get a job, I'm not gonna be able to get my own home, I'm not gonna be able to be back out there. Like, how do I do this? And it's tough because the penal system is so harsh and it's so vicious to those who are victims of circumstance and chance that it's almost as if they don't want them to recover, to keep them in a system. Now that's what we call the school to prison pipeline, and I'm not making this up. You can watch the documentary 13th on it too. So, keep that in mind. You should cover both of those while you're looking at this book. Considering that this book is a lot about the school to prison pipeline, there's chance and circumstance, and then there's that pipeline. So there's things that are just set up that almost seem predetermined to negatively and adversely impact some youth. That's the thing. I think a great way to teach this book, other than what I already mentioned, would be to go over the 94 crime bill. Especially with Biden and Harris coming into office, because let's be real, we got to address some of the critiques. I mean, we don't have to, but I think if you want to teach in a way that gives your students an impartial view of the landscape that's ahead of them, and you want to be not just hopeful but critical of history and where we are headed, taking that 94 crime bill, dissecting it, talking about how it came to be and how its impact has reached so far into the future. Yeah, that's the thing. Because Quan in this book, he is, while he's not a stereotype from the outside looking in, he is what back in that time period they would have described as a super predator. And it's important to go over that. It's important to go over that language, because I don't have to tell you that we are living in a time right now where people are repurposing information and data and statistics to fulfill their own narratives. And you can say I'm doing the same thing. Totally fine. But what I'm telling you, the intent behind it is to enhance the understanding, not just for yourself, but also for your students. And then what's important is, what is it that we do with that information? Are we going to continue to point blame? Or are we going to figure out how we move beyond it? Because moving beyond it sounds mighty nice. It sounds like what we need to do, considering the last couple of years we just had, and considering what's happening to our black and brown children. Lastly, if you really want to get into this, and you want to do like kind of a literary thing where it's like, let's look at how similar concepts can be expressed in different kinds of writing, Punching the Air by E.B. Zuboy. I think that's how you pronounce it. I apologize if I got it wrong. And Yusuf Salaam, one of the Central Park Five, right? That book is about a black kid who, he gets into one fight and then he's locked up and they don't know for how long, right? They throw the book at this kid because he got in a fight with a white guy. But it goes over the prison system and how before you even get to the prison system, especially for black and brown kids, there are things in place that train you to be there, such as being in school and walking on one side of the hall and, asking to go to the bathroom and, having to show your ID everywhere you go, those things. Now that book is written in verse and it's a very fast read. It would make for a great buddy read with this, and it's some bright, fresh, new authors that we could all use because times are changing and there's new information out there, and if we really want to communicate with our students, we should give them things that are accessible to them so that we could capture them first so that they can continue their reading later. Now, if you can't tell by how much I've been gushing about this book, then maybe you weren't listening. You gotta go out and get Dear Justice. You gotta do it. Don't just read it, finish it and then give it to a friend. Because the things that I learned were just so, reading this book really did a lot for me. Because it makes me want to do more. It makes me want to be better. It definitely helped me become a bit more considerate. So yeah, you gotta check it out. You gotta check it out. It's so good. I don't know how else to say it. You gotta read this book. Dear Justice is a wonderful follow-up to Dear Martin. It brings a lot to the table. It brings a different character that we haven't seen yet in a book like this. Is that, so often in these young adult African American texts is that we get characters who are smart. We get characters who have their families because we need that representation. But let's not forget that there are actual black and brown kids out there who don't have that, and they need to be represented too in a way that doesn't make them a stereotype. And this book does that. The research in it is clear. What Nic Stone experienced over the last couple of years in working in those juvenile detention facilities, it shines through, and she puts it on the page, not just for us to learn, but more importantly for those kids, for those experiencing those situations. And just based off that that's enough. That's enough for you to go out and get this. So go do it.